Welcome to the Republican Professor. This morning in California, we have a wonderful guest, Mr. David Frankel. Thanks for being here, David.
Thank you.
David is the author of this book, Coming to Terms. I think you can see it, but if I hold it up, yeah, there we go. Coming to Terms. For those of you listening on YouTube, you can, oh, there you go. David's got it. It's a book called Coming to Terms. You can get it on Amazon. I have this Zoom background that's the San Francisco Bay, and it's the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's obscuring the book. But it's a physically small book, but it is philosophically huge, I would say. So it's got both. It's got big and small, and it's a wonderful read. It's a wonderful short chapters read if you're in a hurry or you want to have it in your pocket at the grocery store, or if you're a nighttime reader like I am. I like to read something before bed, or if you want to have something with your coffee in the morning, just something short. It's very interesting read. And the subtitle of this Coming to Terms book is A Mass Shooting Survivor's Reckoning with Vulnerability and Self-Protection. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. David.
Yep.
David says, yep. Yeah. I don't know where to start. We can start anywhere. First of all, you're an attorney, right?
I am an attorney.
Okay.
I've been an attorney for 32 years. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
And, when this event happened that spurred the book and things I talk about in the book, it was spurred by this mass shooting experience at 101 California Street in San Francisco. I was a young lawyer, third-year corporate associate, living the life, working at a large international law firm, doing sophisticated mergers and acquisitions types of transactions. I am good at that trade. I used to take lunches, and I used to think to myself and talk to my fellow junior associates and scratch my head and think, there's got to be a way for me to figure out how I can make this law thing work for me. And happily, through the different ins and outs of life experience, including what I describe in this book, and the use of technology to become a one-man corporate law firm, I am now living that existence. I do have a very successful corporate law practice in San Francisco. I have a great stable of clients. I'm their go-to person for navigating complex legal matters, and it's very rewarding. I get to help small businesses, family businesses, do everything that business needs, raising money, contracts, everything other than litigation, which is not something I do. And so it has been a long trip from there to here, and many bumps in the road, much experience I got to benefit from. But on that day, if you want to get right into it, I was in the middle of closing a corporate transaction. It was any other day, could be a day like you're having right now, a day like I'm having right now, where you go to the office, you expect to have 5 phone calls and 3 meetings. And I happen to be right in the middle of a delicate negotiation for a couple $1 million loan. And I'll never forget it. I was Had a client, he was in South America at the time. He was a San Francisco company, but he was traveling. Very limited phone access to him. And we were negotiating the fine points of this loan. And it was a company that made clothing, a clothing designer. And they, like a lot of clothing designers then and now, the actual product was designed in San Francisco, and it was to be sold at a major department store in San Francisco, like Nordstrom's, but it was being manufactured in China. And in order to get the clothing to get manufactured and get on a boat and hit the water in time for it to get to San Francisco, clear customs, and get to the store and get out on the shelves by the appropriate fall season or whatever, this deal had to be funded this day. This was the deadline day. So I was on the phone with the other lawyer, the lender's lawyer, and the lender and my client were quibbling over whether we were the borrower, whether we were going to pay the legal fees of the lender. And it wasn't a difficult transaction. And my client wanted to set a $5,000 limit on what we would pay for the for the lender's legal fees. My client said it's no deal if we have to pay more than $5,000 for their legal fees, because a large Los Angeles law firm could bill you for $25,000, $30,000. It's just not a big company. They couldn't afford it. And I was supposed to negotiate the point, and I was supposed to call my client at 3 o'clock and give him an update on what the situation was. And so it was one of these situations. I was on call to get a phone call from the Los Angeles lawyer, and I couldn't do any other work. I just kind of had to, shoot the shit for a minute, kind of, wait these few minutes. So I was talking to a buddy of mine, a different lawyer, just kind of talking, chatting. And all of a sudden, I hear a knock on my door. Mm-hmm. And this guy, I say, come in. And it's this guy named Steve, a senior litigation associate, turned out to be a total hero. And I use that in the true sense of the word. And he was in the process of running around the entire circumference of the building on the 36th floor to warn everyone there was someone in the building shooting people. And he suggested to get the hell out of there. And he shut my door. Mm-hmm. And I said to the guy on the phone, I said, Andy, I don't know what's going on here, but apparently there's somebody shooting people. I got to go. Mm-hmm. And just like they train you for in a fire drill situation, I calmly grabbed my briefcase, put my laptop in my briefcase, grabbed a few papers, including the signature pages for that deal. Okay, because I had my client's signatures and authority, once he said okay, to send them to the other side and close this deal to get this financing that was so important to my client. And I grabbed my coat and I left my office and I went to the appointed location, which was the emergency stairs. And then there was a line of people at the emergency stairs. And I was like, I don't mean to be a dick, but let's go. Like, right. If there's somebody shooting people, let's go. And they told me, well, Ron, this senior partner, who's back then was younger than I am now, but seemed like a decrepit old man at the time. Like he kind of guy who would walk along, shuffle along and pick up lint off the carpet. He was a founding partner of the firm, also a hero, felt a responsibility for us all. And they said, Ron went down to check to see if it was safe. And I thought, oh, well, that might be a good idea, I suppose. And as we were waiting there, he came running up, screaming, he's coming, he's coming. And as soon as he got through the door, the couple people who were at the front slammed that fire door shut. And unbeknownst to us, we had just locked a gunman in the stairwell and stopped him from killing anybody else.
Really? Wow.
But unbeknownst to us, he had already done quite a bit of damage and
Yeah.
quite a bit of killing.
Wow.
And once we locked him in there, and of course, being totally ignorant of guns at the time, I didn't know that, you know, unless he had a 50 caliber rifle with him, I could have stood right at that fire door and taunted the guy, and he couldn't have hit me anything at all. I mean, those are 2-inch steel doors. But we didn't know anything about that. And of course, probably not a good idea to do that anyway. So people scattered and ran. And there was like a flurry of people running. And some people, like secretaries, used to wear high heels at work and stuff. And a couple of them were toppling over. I remember kind of propping one woman up. You know, in any other scenario, it would have been impermissible touching almost, you know, because it was like my hand on her side to make sure she didn't fall. And she kept going. And this one secretary who was like a leader secretary was like, this way, this way. And I thought to myself, I don't know, if this gunman comes out, where do I want to be? Like, where's the smartest place for me? And then it occurred to me, I want to go in this hidden file room that is hidden to make it look like it's not even a room. There's the doors. They designed it because they didn't want clients to walk by and know there was a door there. They wanted it to be a hidden thing. So it was actually looked like a piece of wall and a spring, and you'd push the spring in, and in there would be like a little file clerk room and a little data entry. And so I go running in there, and there's this guy in there, and he's doing data entry on the computer. And I said, stop what you're doing. And he said, hey, this is due at 5. I go, I don't care. Just stop what you're doing. This is an emergency. Somebody is shooting people in the building. And his first words were, do you think it's a terrorist? And this is way pre 9/11, you know, this is 1993.
Right.
And I was thinking,
was it before the Trade Center? Was it before World Trade Center, 1993?
I don't know. You could check the date. It was the date that the shootings happened was July 1st, 1993. And I don't know when the first World Trade Center attack was. But in any case,
well, that was a bomb.
It was attempted bombing, right?
Different kind of MO.
But it wasn't really on my radar. Let's just
say. Sure.
And I said, okay, tell me about these rooms. And I'm the lawyer. I'm wearing a suit, so it makes me like an officer in the law firm corps, you know. And he was like, well, this is a file room, and that other room over there is my boss's office, and this is a second office. So I open up the first room, and it's just shelves and shelves and shelves. And I imagine, what am I lying on a shelf prone, and the gunman comes in, I'm dead. So forget this. And then I look around, and this corporate seal catches my eye, and it's pictured here on this book, right? But this is what it actually looks like, is a 3-pound steel corporate seal, right?
Yeah.
And I grabbed this because I thought, if it comes down to it, I'm going to fight for my life. I'm going to go hand to hand. And this is going upside this dude's head, whoever it is. And we went and looked in the second room, and it was kind of empty, no phone. It was an abandoned supervisor office. Went in the third office, and there was a desk and a phone and a bunch of file boxes. So I said, let's go in here. So we went in there, we shut the door, there was no lock. And I said, help me, we're going to pile boxes against this door. If this guy comes in and he tries to shoot us through the door, we're going to have a lot of paper between that and us. So the first layer was like 6 boxes, and then 5, 4, 3, 2. So we made like a pyramid against the door. And then we felt like if he came, we'd have a fighting chance. And then we used the phone to call our loved ones and let them know we were okay. And then we waited, and we were talking on the phone, taking turns on the phone. And then I said, you know, I better call this other lawyer. Got nothing else to do. So I called the other lawyer in LA and I said, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but we're trapped in a room, barricaded in, and somebody apparently is shooting in our office.
Was this the lawyer that was on the other side of the deal?
Lawyer that was on the other side of the deal in LA. He goes, we're watching it on TV right now.
Wow.
I go, really? What are they showing you? He goes, well, they're showing us that there's a gunman in your building. They have helicopters all around. The SWAT team is there. They're on their way. They're clearing from the top of the building down. And that's what they reported on the news. And I said, look, man, we got to close this deal. And he goes, well, it's highly unusual. I said, well, look, I have the signature pages with me, and I promise I will give you my word right now. This deal is closed. You send the money. And when I get home, I will fax you these signature pages. I guarantee it. And he said, you know, I have never advised a client to fund a loan without the signatures, but I've never been called by a lawyer barricaded inside a building under a gunman threat. And so I'm going to do it.
Wow. How much money was he going to send again?
$3 million.
Wow.
And I said,
that's crazy.
I
That's
promise
amazing.
you will not regret this. And I thought to myself, if my client's pissed over the $5,000, let the firm pay, you know,
Yeah.
what do I care? This is, we're
Wow.
closing. And I closed the deal.
You closed a deal during the mass murder.
Well, I didn't know it was a mass murder at the time.
I know. Yeah, it's amazing story. It's amazing.
And then we heard the shot. We heard the gunman off himself. It turned out our little office shared a wall with that same fire stairwell that he was locked in. And then later somebody came and knocked on our door and said, it's okay, it's safe to come out. And we said, are you sure? And she said, well, we're pretty sure. I said, well, we're pretty comfortable. Why don't you come back when you're sure? And she said, everybody's come out. Everybody is out gathering. And if you want to stay in here, that's fine. But everybody else is coming out. So we undid our barricade and we went out and we met up in the conference room. And then we heard the screaming, and it turned out to be SWAT yelling, SWAT, SWAT, SWAT. But we couldn't really tell what it was until we saw them come and, you know, fully kitted up and decked out. And then they asked us to write down our statements, and we started to hear a little bit more about what had happened.
How long after that did it take for you to find out what the murder devastation was? How many people that he had murdered? How many people that he attempted to murder who were wounded?
Took a little while. There were a few anecdotes. Oh, so-and-so got shot. So-and-so's dead. So-and-so's in the hospital. They're on their way to the hospital. The full ramifications, it took maybe 12 hours before we really found out. After they took our statements, they let us out. And I walked, I called my wife at the time. I told her I was fine and I'd be making it home soon. And then I walked down the street in San Francisco to the closest bar. And I walked in there and I got a drink, you know, said, give me a beer. I need a beer. And I drank a beer, and then a reporter deduced that I had been part of it or near it and started pesking on me. And I got a little bit annoyed and told him to screw off, and I left. And I got a cab and I went home. And then I started the process.
Did you fax those pages?
And of course I did. I faxed the pages and finished that deal off. Wow. And then we learned more, and then the grief set in, and there's this whole like post-incident trauma that you go through, and funerals and eulogies, and then I learned what happened to all the other people, and I heard of different acts of heroism by
Mhm.
by people that you might not have assumed that they were heroes by knowing them. And there were a lot of heroes that day, and I
Mm.
wasn't one of them. I was just I am a regular person, uh, looking to survive a difficult situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, you were actually a good lawyer during that whole time. You finished the deal with your client. I mean, that's amazing. That's I was living in California at the time. I just moved to California in June of 1993, right after I graduated from high school.
Hmm.
And uh, I was thinking I'd never heard of this mass murder, and it's one of those things where I was like, I had to think about it for a sec. Why hadn't I heard of it? Because I was in Southern California at the time, and if it was all over the news, then I realized, duh, the reason I hadn't heard of it is because I was in boot camp at the time in San
Oh,
Diego. And if you know anything about boot camp, you don't sit around watching TV, and nor do you read the newspaper. You are doing other things. And so that's why I missed that. I totally missed it. I didn't even know about it. And I never knew about it until I read about it.
huh.
So it was interesting to see that this thing I missed, this thing I missed. And as I'm getting older, I have to put two and two together like that sometimes. But yeah, it's tell us about the time afterward, the emotional issue that you have, um, feeling like the trauma and being a survivor and all that. You feel
Well,
some of your friends died, right? Some of your
several of my
friends.
friends died, and colleagues, people I respected.
Mhm.
Uh, a few in particular, hit me a little bit harder on an emotional level. You go to a lot of funerals when something like this happens. There is a solidarity. There's no one person at the firm who skipped somebody's funeral. You know, you might
Yeah.
have petty grudges when you're working side by side. Sometimes, oh, I don't like the way that guy rides me on this brief, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. But hey, we were a large firm, but the office had about 250 people working at it, and everyone knew each other. You say hi to each other, you have the same Christmas parties, same Thanksgiving parties, everything like that. So everybody went to every funeral. And
Yeah.
there were a couple that were really, for me personally, for everybody involved, there was tragedy enough to go around. But for me personally, I was touched by two particular tragic circumstances. One was my friend John Scully, who was a associate same year as me, a surfer from Hawaii, who would come over and hang out at my house. Sometimes I would go to his house. Him and his wife were at my first marriage, which happened just a little bit before the shootings. In fact, a month or so before. So
Oh,
I
wow.
was off, and my first week or so back was when this incident occurred.
Mhm.
Um, and John wanted to move on to other things, find a different way, didn't really like working in a large law firm. His wife was studying to be a lawyer. That particular day, she was using our law library. That particular day, when the gunman started chasing people down on the 35th floor, and it was only a fluke. I was on the 36th floor. There's internal staircases that connect the 34th, 35th, and 36th floors at the time in this building. And it's only a fluke that he went for the 35th floor first. It turned out um, that because we did like a debrief and asked everybody to write their statement, and I read all those statements, so I actually know what happened. He was trying, I guess, for the 35th floor. He ended up getting out first on 34, and the reason was that he the two secretaries had hit the down button for lunch,
Mhm.
and they were ready to go down for lunch, and he was still loading up weapons in the elevator. The door opened and unexpectedly, and he literally said to them, "I'll be with you in a second." And they saw that he had all these guns, and they ran. And then he hit the fire alarm in the elevator to stick it open, and then he started his massacre there instead of his initial plan. He actually had a list of lawyers' names he wanted to kill, and he didn't get to his list. He ended up going randomly around. And um, when the shooting started, my friend John went to retrieve his wife. That put him in harm's way. She was in harm's way, and they were running for their lives. They got noticed by the gunman, and he chased them down to a place that was my former office that I had moved out of, and they tried to barricade the door shut but didn't have enough time, and he broke in on them. And John literally took the bullets for his wife. He shielded her and took like 8 bullets or whatever.
This
And
is the
gave
guy
his
from
life for
Hawaii.
hers,
This is the surfer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he gave his life for hers, and she
Wow.
got shot and recovered, and he died on the scene in her arms, and
Wow.
such a tragic thing. It's hard to, really imagine.
Yeah.
So that one was really a painful thing to know about and think about, not dwell on, but just to honor the man's heroism and courage, and to put his life above his wife's, and
Sure.
literally take the bullets for her.
Mhm.
Just tremendous. And then um, there was another lawyer, Brian Berger. He was one of my mentors, and his situation was a little bit different. He survived the shooting day. He was on a stretcher. He was one of the people who got taken out, and he survived the shooting day. But he had excuse me, he had a shard of bullet that was too close to his heart to operate. And he knew after he recovered from the hospital that any one day could be his last day. He had a newborn daughter, and he came back to work, and he lived every day like the fullest. And I had lunch with him during this time, and he was cheerful in general, and he was just a wonderful example of somebody who is living every day and living fully. And yet within a few months after that, it took him. And that was super sad also. So and of course there was
What was Berger's
lawyers.
first name again?
Brian
Ryan.
Brian Berger, great
He-
lawyer, phenomenal, just a very excellent lawyer and an excellent person.
Hmm.
And so then lawyers, we're like not necessarily because of our legal training, we can be kind of cold and analytic, you might say. um, and some of the lawyers jumped into action, and that's when they formed Legal Community Against Violence.
Yeah.
That's when they started um, sending off a raft of lawsuits, trying to hold the gun manufacturer liable for the acts of the depraved maniac. And
Let's just pause right there for and dwell a bit on the emotion of the story, because I'm going to tell you what I'm noticing about the story and how I feel as you tell me this. With that anecdote you mentioned about the elevator, that's a very creepy story right there. He's loading up, and I'm having a hard time picturing um what kind of weapons he had, but I know something about that. If I was uh to use the term that was used back then, secretary, if I was a secretary, and I wasn't used to guns and I didn't even know what I was looking at, it might have been very, very scary. And of course, now I would have probably more information coming in my mind, but were these shotguns, were these so-called assault rifles, or were these handguns,
It's a
revolvers?
common question.
Do you have a bag of them? Is it
He had a duffel bag full
okay?
of guns and ammo, loaded magazines. He
Okay.
had a 9mm pistol as his backup. His primary weapon was a Tech 9, which, if you know what that is,
That's
it's
a
like
scary
a
looking gun. That would be a scary
scary
looking gun
looking,
for,
crappy gun.
yeah,
It's too bad it didn't
right.
malfunction
Yeah.
when he was using it. But it looks like a submachine gun, even though it's not, right? So
Those have been
that's one.
banned, right?
In California, they have been. I think the actual company went out of business.
Okay.
Not entirely sure, but it was you would know
It looks
that
like an
was the
Uzi.
gun.
Kind of looks
Huh?
like an Uzi. Does it kind of look like an Uzi, like a little Uzi?
I mean, if you don't really know what an Uzi looks like, it
Yeah,
would.
if like a miniature Uzi, I guess, because a Uzi is bigger, but I don't know.
I mean, I've shot Uzis, and this was no Uzi, but it was.
Yeah.
It looks like a cosmetically, it's meant to look like a real mean gun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. When people say he has all these guns, I understand the emotion of that. I get that. But from my more analytic perspective, it seems kind of clunky to me because I know what it would be almost like saying he's got all these cars, and so therefore he's going to be more likely to be a DUI person or whatever. It's you can only drive one car at a time. It seems like a bit clunky. So I was just wondering kind of what he was up to. And I mean, I know he's crazy. I mean, he's a murderer. He's clearly a murderer.
Well, he did have a
Um,
manifesto that was found afterwards where he
yeah,
believed that the government was putting MSG in his food in order to drive him insane. And he was I don't mention his name because I'm in the
right.
no name, no fame uh,
Yeah,
group of people. But
yeah,
he had he was one of these people who like they used to have these TV commercials at night, like make $1 million in real estate. All you have to do is go to this seminar.
right.
And he went to one of those seminars, and they actually pulled together a deal, a multi-million-dollar deal, and hired the law firm to represent him, and they did. And I would say they did a pretty good job, because when the other side breached the deal, they recovered $1 million judgment for him, uh, which leads you to wonder how he became a disgruntled client or former
Yeah,
client.
yeah.
But he blew the money, and
Mm,
his life went downhill, and then he blamed those lawyers
gotcha.
basically, and
So he
decided to kill him.
so he was he he made some bad choices. He wasn't well or healthy, and then he decided to blame other people for his life circumstance. Sounds like.
Well, and then
And
decided to
then
kill them.
victimize them for his, yeah. That's interesting.
And I can
It's
tell you this, when he was going around, we know from the anecdotal information that came back that at one point he walked into a meeting of computer techs that worked for the firm with the gun, looked around, saw none of them wearing suits, and walked out.
hmm,
But then when he saw a bunch of suits in a conference room, he shot
right.
the thing up,
Interesting.
and there's no doubt, if there had been a concealed carrier in the building who was willing to run toward the gunfire, they could have taken him out
Yeah.
easily.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting to the next phase here, because there's there's an arc to your story. And you wouldn't have said that back then, right? You wouldn't have said what you just said back then about the
That's
concealed
true.
carry.
Right after the event, it was knee-jerk gun control.
Yeah. So to stay in the same geographic location, but a different decade, when Harvey Milk was killed, and Dianne Feinstein was there, I think she was in the city council or something. She was there, and Dan White, I believe his name was, used he brought a gun in to the building. Is it fair to say that you would have had Dianne Feinstein's reaction? Because Dianne Feinstein, as I recall, went immediately into gun control from that incident. Is it fair to say that you would have had a similar reaction once things calmed down? You wouldn't have said, we need concealed carry people.
I'd like to unpack your question a little bit, just
Okay.
because, not being a reptilian octogenarian, there's no way for me to project into Dianne Feinstein's brain. But what I can say is that
That's a quote right there. That's got to be on a coffee mug or something. You get 10%.
What I can say is that there was first and foremost a sense of relief and of grief and of healing, right? And secondly, there was a murmur that came from somewhere that the solution to this was gun control.
Yeah.
And the people who fronted that, got in front of that murmur and made a big deal about it, were the surviving spouses of a couple of the individuals who had been murdered. And so you had some very quick testimonies come up that were arranged and funded somehow. And all of a sudden, people were testifying in front of Congress, with a lot of tears, right? It was hugely emotional thing. You had
It's good TV.
On TV, you had one individual with the baby, and the mom was killed.
It's good.
And
What I'm saying is it's good ratings. It's good TV. Yeah.
Well, it was, and good news, right? If it bleeds, it leads. And so, and there was no, and I didn't have the knowledge, experience, tools, or education to rebuff or to do anything other than go along with that cavalcade of let's have gun control here.
Yeah. Can I make a rhetorical observation? As I noticed, you, as you were describing the man, the evil man, you were using the term gunman, and that's a term I hear people use a lot. And it, at that stage of emotion, like I'm picturing the doors opening of the elevators, and he's loading some gun, and he's got guns, and he's a gunman. And it sounds to me like, yeah, in that emotion, that fear, that horror, the terror, the profound tragic sadness, the anger that comes later, the gun sounds like the problem, like. And what I love about your book is you can't quite tell where it's going. I mean, there's little hints, but you're very good at telling the story. And then there's a real subtle shift, and it sounds very real, sounds natural the way it is. I mean, I can tell this is a real story, where that very understandable gun control impulse, because of the way we talk, and we don't even, I mean, we don't, there's habits that we have, and there's fear and there's tears, and it seems like that's obviously the answer. So I think I'm trying to explain why so many people have that knee-jerk reaction. It seems like everybody at your firm had the same. I mean, it's quite amazing that you have all these highly educated people and they all have the same reaction. And how do you explain that?
Well, I
It's
mean,
very puzzling to me. Such a diverse country, we have such monolithic thinking about this.
law firms are not ideologically diverse, even less so now than they were then.
Where did you go to law school?
I went to law school at NYU.
NYU, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Yeah.
I'm kidding. It's in New
Yeah.
York, right?
Yeah, it's in New York, in Greenwich Village. It's a very liberal, left-leaning law school. Very much in the interest of civil rights and things like that. It's quite an interesting backstory to the whole law school, but it's probably not something you and your listeners want to hear. But they bought their way into the top 10 with a $200 million donation from the Mueller spaghetti family. But anyway, when I went there, it was
That's a good law school, though. I mean,
it is a good law school. And
are you from New
law
York?
school,
Did you grow up in New York? I'm listening for an accent. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm from Long Island.
Long Island, all right.
Yeah. And I went to a college called Amherst College.
Oh, yeah.
Massachusetts? In Massachusetts. And I was a political science English major. And I went right to law school. And
did you ever have Hadley Arcus as a professor? I did. No kidding.
I absolutely did have Professor Arcus, and he was one of my thesis advisor.
Really?
Not advisor, but he was on my thesis committee. I had to defend my thesis to Hadley Arcus.
No kidding.
Yeah. What a powerful intellect. And I will say about Hadley Arcus, he was right then, and he's still right about his way of looking at things. So you knew his view. I mean, I'm assuming anybody who ever has him as a professor knows his views about things, but how did he strike you when you had him? Did he strike you as crazy? As an intellectual hard ass. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, he was very intellectually strict, and my thesis advisor was like his adversary, and was like a very great mind who was very left-leaning. And what was that person's name? Do you recall? Well, sure. My thesis thesis advisor was Professor Kateb, who Kateb, political science professor. Kateb. Yeah, he moved to Princeton. I don't know if he's still a professor or not. First name? Do you remember? I don't. Okay. I don't. Interesting. My thesis was the influence of Socratic and Christian thought on civil disobedience. And Professor Arcus didn't think that I penetrated the issue deeply enough. Sounds like something he would say. He would only give me a B plus, and I wanted the A. But anyway, he was right. I didn't agree with him at the time, but I would agree with him now. Did you ever have any classes with him? Oh, yeah. Do you remember what you took? I don't, but the abortion issue came up, and it had to do with first principles. First principles. This is really
unexpected gem of this interview. I love this. And it's funny because David, I'm having mixed feelings as I'm having a little shame as I listen to this, because I just realized I have an email from Hadley Arcus that I didn't respond to from a couple months ago, and I just remembered that during this time. So
He's
this is
pretty available on the email. I've emailed
he's
with him as
very quick.
well.
Yeah, he's very
And
quick.
I thanked him for one of his articles that was published in American Greatness.
Hmm.
And he wrote me back right away. He's got a little, like a little foundation going, and he's got some Amherst grad who's maybe 10 years behind me, who's working out there, getting together for something in Washington, D.C. I'm sure that if you connected with him, he would, you might end up in Washington, D.C. at this, conservative think tank meeting of some kind. I don't know.
Yeah. I emailed him because when the Dobbs, well, actually, wait, well, I knew that there was an imminent ruling from the Supreme Court. I knew it was going to come in June, and on abortion. And I wanted to get him on the podcast to kind of predict about it, and just kind of honor his work on it. And while we were talking about scheduling, I think the might have been after the leak happened. I can't remember, but the leak messed everything up. Basically it took the steam out of getting him on quicker, because it seemed like we now knew what they were going to say. And I got my summer got ahead of me, and I never got back to him. But I know the think tank you're talking about, because after I emailed him, I all of a sudden started getting emails from the James Wilson Institute, and I'm pretty sure he put my name on the email list. So he's an activist, but he's a deep scholar. And in fact, he's the one, probably one of the 2 or 3 people, I'd say he's one of the 3 people that got me interested in constitutional law in the first place, which is what I did my doctoral dissertation on. But it's you were very well educated. You went to this really good college, and you went to NYU, and you were in the middle of saying that lawyers, I don't know if do you mean all lawyers or just ones in that San Francisco building, are pretty monolithic?
I'm not going to
I
speak
interrupted
to
you,
all
but
lawyers. And the reason is because all lawyers have a diversity of experience,
yeah.
But the kind of lawyers that work in this kind of law firm that is where they only recruit at the top law schools, and they fly you around the country for interviews and wine you and dine you. They do that to this group of students that I was fortunate to be a part of, where there's active competition among large multinational firms to attract you to say yes to their offer. So they give you really, luxurious summer associate jobs and pay you for not doing a whole lot and take you on winery trips. I mean, this is how it used to be. I can't speak to what it is like now, but that kind of law firm was the kind of law firm that I was at. And
Wow.
all of us almost.
Sounds nice, actually.
Well, it was nice,
Yeah.
And so it was nice enough such that we're all, by definition, isolated from a lot of the grittier aspects of real life existence. It's the kind of thing where you can have the luxury of not thinking about your own self-defense, because it doesn't come up, because you work in an office where there's a doorman, and you live in a building where there's a doorman, or you live in a neighborhood that is uphill from the lower parts of the city and not easy to access, or whatever. Nowadays it would be the gated community, which I don't live in, but it's similar. And back then they used to teach us in law school that the Second Amendment was a collective right.
Yeah.
And that was, if you took a test and said on the answer, that it's an individual right, well, you're going to fail that class. So, don't
Wow.
say that on your exam. If and it's not even going to be on the exam,
Right.
because it's
Yeah.
it's not considered something worth testing. Back
Yes.
when I went to law school, I graduated law school in 1990, and
Amazing. That
uh,
is amazing. That's not that long ago. That's not
no,
that long ago. And
no,
I
no,
have my
that's how
political
you look
science
at it.
text. I have my undergrad political science. I only took one government course as an undergrad, and I have the book still. And I look at the Second Amendment section, and it is pathetic. It is embarrassing. And it's like 2 paragraphs or something.
Which goes to the incredible intellectual body of writing and work that was published in the
Yes.
80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, and the kind of, I'm sure Chuck Michel can list the 20 authors that contributed to that body of work through law review articles. I wish I could, but I don't have those names on the top of my head, but maybe you know some of them. And these are people who really went through and did appropriate historical and intellectual and constitutional analysis, and then it started to percolate up through the courts, and we got Heller as a result. But before that, I mean, I'm sure, I believe the cases as well or better than I do, and how they came to be. But the old U.S. Miller case, I mean, that was a travesty.
Yeah.
And it was just until recently, it was treated as the redheaded stepchild, so to speak, of the Constitution.
Since you brought up some of the case law, I thought I would mention one of the things I like about the book is at the end, as an appendix, you have, it looks like, is it the full opinion in Heller?
And McDonald, I think, isn't it? Is it Heller or just Heller?
It looks like it's Heller.
Okay.
I think that would
Heller.
be a bit long. So you have the majority opinion in Heller. Yeah, that's cool. And so when you get the book, you get to read, and it's a very readable decision. You get a major Supreme Court.
Let's give props to CRPA for a moment,
Yeah.
and Chuck Michel. Chuck was my publisher as well, independently of CRPA. The project is a no compensation project, as far as I received no compensation, nor did I want any. I wanted a chance I was asked by Chuck to do the book, and I know you've had him on your show a couple times.
Yeah.
And there's great testament to his dedication and great work for the decades in protecting all of our rights as civil rights.
That's right. Yeah.
And
yeah, it's not the gun lobby. It's not. I love that you brought up that it's pro bono for you, because the margins on this are not. I mean, this is we're not we're putting pennies together. I mean, we do not have a lot of money to do this fight. And Chuck takes a discounted rate to do this work. And it's the language that gets thrown around like it's we're kind of just industry shills. I mean, no, that's not what this is. This is everybody's right to defend themselves. I think I need to tell you about tell